I know what you have been told. Go no contact, disappear completely, give them the silence they always seem to want, and watch them come running. It is the most consistently repeated advice in every comment section, every forum, every conversation between friends trying to help someone navigate the confusion of loving an avoidant. And there is enough truth in it to make it feel credible. The silence does affect an avoidant. I have talked about that honestly on this channel. The absence of pursuit removes the thing their defense system was built to manage. The quiet creates space for the feelings they were containing to surface. The removal of guaranteed access interrupts the unconscious assumption that you will always be there, regardless of how little they show up. All of that is real, but no contact is a strategy, deployed with the specific goal of producing a particular response in the avoidant, has a fundamental problem that most people do not talk about honestly enough. It is still organized around them. The silence that is performed in order to make someone come back is not genuine silence. It is pursuit wearing a different costume. The attention has not moved away from the avoidant. It has simply changed its form. Instead of reaching towards them, it is watching them from a careful distance, monitoring for signs of the desired response, structuring itself around the question of whether it is working. And the avoidant, who is extraordinarily attuned to emotional texture, feels the difference. They feel the watching in the silence. They feel the waiting underneath the absence. They feel the distance that is still fundamentally about them, still organized around them, still hoping for something from them. And that quality of performed silence does not produce the profound internal shift that genuine silence produces. It produces a recalibration, a period of increased pursuit followed eventually by the return to the familiar pattern. Because nothing has actually changed. The dynamic is running exactly as it always ran, just with the roles slightly adjusted. So what actually works? Let me tell you what I believe from everything I have lived and observed and understood about this dynamic. Genuinely interrupts the pattern in a way that no contact as a tactic never quite manages. It is not a strategy at all. It is a reorientation. A genuine, internal, not performed for anyone including yourself, reorientation of where your life is pointed. Let me be specific about what that means in practice. The first thing is what I call engaged disappearance. Not the disappearance of someone who has gone quiet in order to be noticed, but the disappearance of someone who has genuinely gone somewhere inside their own life. The distinction sounds subtle. It is not. It is everything. When you go no contact in order to make an avoidant feel your absence, the energy of your life is still pointing at the avoidant, even in the silence. You are not actually anywhere. You are just not contacting them. Your attention, your hope, your emotional resources are still organized around the question of what they are feeling and what they are going to do. Engaged disappearance is different. It is the active, genuine, invested turning of your attention towards your own becoming. Not as a distraction from the avoidant, not as a performance of moving on designed to be noticed, but as a real, specific daily investment in the things that belong to your life independently of this relationship. The project you have been postponing, the friendship you have been half present in, the version of your work that you have been giving reduced attention to because so much of your cognitive and emotional bandwidth has been allocated to the dynamic. The physical, creative, intellectual, spiritual dimensions of yourself that quietly contracted while the dynamic expanded. Those things need your actual attention, not the attention that is left over after the monitoring, not the presence that remains when the hoping has been temporarily exhausted. Your full, genuine, redirected presence. And here is what that produces, both for you and incidentally, not strategically, for the avoidant. For you, it begins the process of rebuilding the interior life that the dynamic was quietly colonizing, the thoughts that are yours rather than about them, the satisfactions that belong to you rather than to the hope of them, the slow return of the person you were before the dynamic became the primary weather system of your interior world. That return is not instant. It is not comfortable at first. The habit of monitoring does not disappear because you have decided to redirect. It keeps firing. The reflex to check, to wonder, to calculate where they are in the cycle keeps asserting itself. But each time you bring your attention back to your own life, to the actual thing in front of you that is yours and real and worthy of your full presence, the habit loses a little of its grip. And over time, the reorientation becomes less effortful. Not because you stop caring, but because the caring starts to compete with something, with your own life genuinely lived, with the specific satisfactions of a person who is actually invested in their own becoming. For the avoidant, what your engaged disappearance produces is something qualitatively different from what performed silence produces. It produces the experience of a you that is genuinely elsewhere, not waiting in the silence, not watching from a careful distance, actually somewhere, actually occupied, actually alive in your own life in a way that has nothing to do with them. And that specific experience, the experience of someone they mattered to, being genuinely, fully elsewhere, is something the avoidance pattern has almost never had to contend with. Because most people, even in their no contact, are still there in some form, still pointed at the avoidant, still organized around the hope. But a person who is genuinely elsewhere, who has taken their attention and their energy and their hope and pointed it at something that has nothing to do with the avoidant, that person is not a presence managing their distance. That person is an absence, a real one, with their own shape and their own direction and their own life happening without reference to what the avoidant is doing. And that kind of absence does something to the avoidant that performed silence never does. It makes the loss real, not theoretically real, not the loss that exists in the background of the dynamic as a possibility the avoidant intellectually knows about, but actually, concretely, undeniably real, because you are not there, not in the silence waiting to be found, not in the distance hoping to be bridged, actually somewhere else. The second thing is honest communication before the disappearance. This is the part that most no-contact advice skips entirely, and I think it is one of the most important parts. Before you redirect your life, before the genuine reorientation begins, there is something that deserves to be said. Not as an ultimatum, not as a final attempt to make them understand, but as the honest, clear, one-time articulation of where you are and what you need. Something that sounds like this: I have been in this dynamic for a long time, and I have given it everything I know how to give. I am not angry, and I am not trying to make a point, but I am not available to continue in the same pattern. I need something different, and if that is not something you are able to offer right now, then I am going to focus on my own life. Said once, clearly, without the weight of 1,000 previous conversations attached to it, without the hope of a particular response embedded in the saying of it, just the truth, offered honestly, and then let go. That communication does something that disappearing without it does not do. It gives the avoidant information they can actually use. Not the information of your silence, which is ambiguous and interpretable in multiple ways, but the clear, direct information of where you stand and what you are doing and why. And it removes the avoidant's ability to tell themselves the story that you are fine, that your distance is just a phase, that you will come back around eventually because you always have before. The honest communication closes that story before you go, and the disappearance that follows it lands differently because the avoidant knows, with a clarity that silence alone never quite provides, what the disappearance means. The third thing is patience with your own process, because the reorientation I am describing is not quick, and it is not linear, and it will not feel, in the early stages, like something that is working. It will feel like loss, like grief, like the specific, difficult experience of a person who has decided to stop doing the thing that was at least keeping the hope alive and started doing the thing that requires sitting with the uncertainty of not knowing what comes next. That is uncomfortable in a way that no contact as a strategy is not, because strategy at least feels like doing something, like being in control of something, like having a plan that might produce a specific outcome. Genuine reorientation does not offer that comfort. It just offers the truth that your life is yours, that your attention and your energy and your hope are among the most valuable things you have, that spending them indefinitely on someone who has not demonstrated the consistent willingness to meet them is a cost you are no longer available to pay. And the truth, sat with honestly over time, produces something that no strategy ever quite manages. Not necessarily the outcome you were hoping for with the avoidant, but the life you were meant to be living, fully, genuinely, with your whole self pointed at your own becoming. And from that place, whatever happens with the avoidant, whatever they choose or do not choose, whatever the silence produces or does not produce, you are already somewhere real, already building something that belongs to you, already, finally, the main character of the story you have been supporting someone else through for far too long. That is not a consolation prize. That is the whole point.